Well, hello there. As you could tell, it's been a costume change and a location change. Technology got me once again. But here we are, time to enter into our sermon. Our first reading today gives us a deeper glance into the life of Jacob. Jacob is an interesting character, and he has led an adventurous life. In case you do not recall, Jacob is on the run, and that is how this encounter takes place. Jacob, with the help of his mother, created one of the biggest lies and pranks in the history of the world that led him to stealing the birthright from his older brother by flat out lying to his pa and covering it up, literally. Self-interest to the highest degree. Jacob's mom sent him away because she was fearful for his life. At this point in the story, it seems that Jacob is lost. The lost factor is that it seems like he is in between time and place. An unsettling place. In this unsettling place, Jacob is vulnerable. And in his vulnerability, he goes to sleep because the sun is setting. Now, whether Jacob realizes this or not, the very spot where he stops to sleep is the place where his grandfather Abram, upon reaching the promised land, had built an altar to the Lord. He was camping where his grandpa camped. In this dream and vision, God comes to meet him. God meets up with Jacob in an unexpected place. God talks with him and renews the promises that were given to his grandparents and his parents. Friends, there is no mistake about it. Jacob had a checkered past. None of that matters when God decides to move or call, though. God went looking for him, and God pursued him relentlessly. We may even say, like last week, the pursuit would seem reckless to many. Following this encounter, Jacob was changed. There was transformation. When we are touched by God's love and grace, our lives should be transformed. Sometimes the space may be intruded. I struggle and wrestle with this thought and concept often. Many times I think that we have created this divide between humanity and God. And God breaks through the divide and comes straight to us. God makes a home in our midst. Jacob recognizes what is occurring, and he renames this place. Jacob calls this place what it is: Bethel, the house of God, the gate of heaven, an awesome place. I believe that we are far removed from the story and how gods were reviewed. Back in the day, gods were often associated with a specific place or land. But this God of Abraham and Sarah, of Isaac and Rebekah, and Jacob himself will not be limited to one place or one time. Can you imagine how this new news in reality must have felt? I believe it must have given Jacob great comfort to hear God's promise to be with him always and to bring him back home to the land he had promised. Here's the interesting thing. Jacob hears these same promises on his way out of the land of promise, just as his grandfather heard them on the way in. How cool is that? Okay, maybe it's just me. In either case, and in our case as well, we can be reminded that God is the one who takes the initiative. As you are aware by now, I'd like to preach the gospel text, though I'm not afraid to wade into the other texts. I chose the first reading, our Old Testament reading today, because we are as a community. We should be grateful for the news that God will not be limited to place and time. We are 4 months into this pandemic. There are so many Christians across the country that have not been able to re-enter into their spaces. Even though we as Winds of the Prairie Ministry have opened our doors, there are many in our parish who do not feel comfortable or safe to be in this space. And that is perfectly okay. Thus, I see tension playing out. There's a tension for people of faith and our love for our places of worship, our sacred spaces. Deep in our hearts, I believe that we understand the claims that God is not associated ultimately with place, but in relationship and promise. However, we as embodied creatures do experience God in places that we can feel, places that we could cherish, places that invoke memories, places that we mourn when they are destroyed, or places that we cannot go to because of the pandemic. Folks are hurting and mourning, and I believe that hurt and mourning is causing deep pain in many areas of our lives and affects the community in ways that we cannot even fully imagine. On the other side of the coin, I think in the past, prior to COVID, we missed the encounters with God that happened in our daily lives because we expected for all the encounters to take place in our holy and sacred space. Maybe that is one area where having our buildings closed and not being able to have full activities helped us understand God's presence with us outside of the church buildings. Indeed, we experience God in more places than our church buildings. The last 4 months have been an adventure. May we as an individual and a community continue to realize that we have a God that loves us and pursues us continuously. A God that will continue to walk with us and journey with us, even when we are unable to be in the buildings that we love. As I conclude this sermon, I'm going to quickly jump into the gospel reading and say the following. Our world is messy. There's not much hope in our world today, is there? We have the capability, though, of bringing light and hope to the world. As we follow the way of God's kingdom, which can be lived out by the parable, it can also all begin with the Sermon on the Mountain and these challenging words. Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. For the world and us, the good news is that God is at work to redeem and restore the whole creation. Please remember, there may be an outside threat that resists, oppresses, and fights against God's kingdom. But God's plan for the world will succeed. Amen.